A cold night. Snow. A luxury car stops. Inside, one of the richest men in the city. On the sidewalk, a little girl fighting for breath, an empty inhaler in her hand. He breaks every rule he lives by and carries her to the ER. But the shock isn't just the rescue. The hospital asks for a guardian. Insurance stalls. Time is running out. Then, an even bigger twist. The crumbling building that's making kids sick. It secretly traces back to him. As the city watches, a quiet nurse demands real help, not a photo. A fierce grandmother sets the terms. Dignity first, receipts on the wall. A hidden link from his past surfaces. And a late-night fire threatens to burn the truth down. Boardrooms turn on him. Neighbors don't trust him. Cameras roll. Now the powerful man must choose. Protect an empire built on silence. Or risk everything to keep a promise to one brave child and an entire block. He thought he was saving a life for one night. But what if the only way to save her is to change everything? When mercy costs more than money, what will he do? The snow danced under the amber glow of street lamps, swirling like tiny stars against the dark winter sky. Thick, fluffy flakes settled on windshields faster than wipers could clear them away. Traffic moved sluggishly through the wet streets, tires hissing against the slick asphalt, horns occasionally punctuating the muffled urban soundtrack. Inside his heated Mercedes, Ethan Hale scrolled through emails on his tablet, his mind still caught up in the upcoming board meeting's talking points. The leather seats creaked softly as he shifted, the car's interior warm and insulated from the harsh elements outside. "Crowd ahead, sir," his security guard, Marcus, said from the front seat, his broad shoulders filling the driver's space as he peered through the windshield wiper's steady rhythm. "Might want to take fifth instead. Looks like some kind of commotion." Ethan glanced up briefly, catching sight of huddled figures through the foggy window, then looked back to his screen. The quarterly numbers needed reviewing before tomorrow's presentation. Street drama wasn't his concern. He had a company to run and shareholders to please. The blue light of his tablet illuminated his face in the darkened car interior. But as they idled at the red light, something, perhaps a movement, perhaps just instinct, made him look again. The small crowd had parted slightly, and through the gap he saw her. A young girl, maybe 11 or 12, was doubled over on the sidewalk beneath a flickering streetlight. Even from here, he could see her desperate gasps for air, one hand clutching an inhaler, the other braced against her knee. Her dark braids hung forward, hiding her face, but her posture screamed distress. Snowflakes landed on her thin jacket, melting instantly against the fabric. "Stop the car," Ethan said, surprising himself with the urgency in his voice. Marcus turned around, security training evident in his furrowed brow. "Sir, that's not advisable. We're already running late for your meeting with the Tokyo investors, and this neighborhood isn't on our security-approved route." I said stop. Ethan's voice carried the same tone he used in boardrooms when he needed absolute compliance. Firm, unyielding, brooking no argument. The car pulled over with a gentle lurch, tires crunching through the gathering snow. Before Marcus could object again, Ethan was out in the swirling snow, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the salt-covered sidewalk. The cold immediately bit through his thin dress socks, but he barely noticed. As he got closer, he could hear the girl's labored breathing, the terrible wheeze in her chest echoing in the quiet night air. Bystanders stood in an awkward circle, shifting from foot to foot, smartphones in hand, but none actually calling for help. "Hey there," he said, kneeling beside her on the wet concrete. His knee soaked through immediately, the cold seeping into his skin, but it seemed insignificant compared to the girl's distress. Up close, her lips had a bluish tint that made his stomach clench with recognition and fear. Her eyes, wide with panic, finally met his. "I'm Ethan. Can you tell me your name?" She tried to speak between gasps, each word a struggle forcing its way past constricted airways. "Nania." She clutched the inhaler tighter, pressing it to her lips again with trembling fingers. "Your inhaler's empty?" he asked, though he could see the answer in how desperately she kept trying to use it, in the hollow rattle when she shook it. The plastic device looked worn, the label faded from constant handling. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, leaving glistening tracks on her dark cheeks. A small whimper escaped between gasps, the sound piercing Ethan's usual professional detachment. Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'm taking you to the hospital." He looked at the bystanders, who had done nothing but watch, their faces a mixture of concern and uncertainty. Snow gathered on shoulders and hats as they stood immobile. "Has anyone called 911? A few mumbles and head shakes answered him, some people suddenly finding the ground very interesting. Ethan clenched his jaw, but there wasn't time for anger. He could see Nia's breathing getting worse, her shoulders hunching further with each labored attempt to draw air. "Hold on to me, okay?" He scooped her up, surprised at how light she felt in his arms, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. Her whole body shook with the effort to breathe, small fingers clutching desperately at his coat. She smelled of drugstore shampoo and the faint medicinal scent of albuterol. Marcus appeared at his side, face set in professional disapproval. "Sir, this isn't protocol. Let me call an ambulance. Get the car door." Ethan snapped, already moving toward the idling Mercedes. "We're going to St. Gabriel's. It's 4 blocks away. She doesn't have time to wait for an ambulance." In the car, Ethan held Nia against his chest, feeling every struggled breath like it was happening in his own lungs. She clutched his expensive suit jacket with trembling fingers, wrinkling the fine wool. The fear in her eyes made his throat tight. He recognized that look, the same one he'd had as a child when his own world had spun out of control, when adults made decisions around him, but not for him. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, surprising himself with how much he meant it, how urgently he needed it to be true. "Just try to stay calm. We're almost there. Count with me, okay? In for 4. He demonstrated a slow breath. "Out for 4. She tried to follow, her breath hitching painfully. Snow swirled in the headlights as they sped through yellow lights. Marcus for once ignoring his usual security protocols, his hands tight on the wheel as he navigated the slippery streets with precision. Ethan kept his eyes on Nia's face, watching her lips grow darker, listening to the whistle in her chest getting worse. Each labored breath seemed harder than the last, her small chest rising and falling with increasing effort. The emergency room entrance loomed ahead, its lights cutting through the winter night like a beacon of hope. The red emergency sign glowed against the falling snow, promising help just yards away. Before the car fully stopped at the ambulance bay, Ethan was moving, gathering Nia close and pushing the door open with his shoulder. "I need help!" he called out as he carried her through the automatic doors that whooshed open to admit them, his commanding voice cutting through the waiting room chatter like a knife. "Severe asthma attack! She can't breathe!" Medical staff converged quickly, bringing a gurney with practiced efficiency. A nurse with kind eyes and quick hands directed them, already assessing Nia's condition even as she approached. Ethan laid Nia down carefully on the crisp white sheets, but her hand stayed clenched in his jacket, fear giving her surprising strength. "Sir, are you her father?" the nurse asked, already taking vital signs, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around Nia's thin arm, clipping an oxygen monitor to her finger. "No, Ethan started to step back, to return to his organized, scheduled life, where board meetings and investment portfolios waited for his attention. But Nia's frightened eyes locked onto his, wide and pleading, and he remembered another scared child, himself, alone in a hospital long ago after the accident, with no hand to hold. I'm staying with her until we reach her family. The gurney started moving, wheels squeaking against the linoleum floor, nurses calling out numbers and medical terms that blurred together in Ethan's ears. Ethan walked alongside, his hand now holding Nia's small one, his meeting notes forgotten in the car. Her palm was damp with sweat, but her grip was surprisingly strong. It was still the same winter night. The clock on Ethan's phone read 9:42 p.m. when the nurse with butterfly-patterned scrubs asked for a guardian's name. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently, covering the city in a blanket of white, erasing footprints and tire tracks, while inside, under the harsh fluorescent lights, something in Ethan's carefully constructed world had already begun to shift. The fluorescent lights of St. Gabriel's emergency room cast harsh shadows as Ethan stood at the intake desk, his usually steady hands fumbling with insurance forms. The clipboard felt unnaturally heavy in his grasp, and the sterile hospital scent, antiseptic and industrial cleaner, filled his nostrils. Behind him, Nia sat on the examination bed, an oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath, her small shoulders rising and falling with visible effort. The thin hospital gown hung loosely around her frame, making her appear even more vulnerable. "I need her guardian's information," the clerk repeated, tapping her pen against the counter with an impatient rhythm. Her glasses slipped down her nose as she peered at the half-completed paperwork. "We can't proceed with full admission without it." Marisol Vega stepped in, her navy scrubs rustling as she moved between them with purposeful strides. The ID badge clipped to her pocket swung gently as she reached for the equipment tray. "Let's focus on treatment first. I'm starting her on a nebulizer." Her calm voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter, bringing immediate reassurance to the room. She turned to Nia, speaking directly to her instead of over her head like so many medical professionals did with young patients. "This medicine will help open up your airways. It might make you feel a little shaky, but that's normal. The tingling in your fingers just means it's working." Nia nodded, her eyes wide above the mask, dark lashes fluttering against her cheeks. Marisol worked quickly, setting up the nebulizer with practiced hands, connecting tubes and checking medication levels with efficient movements that spoke of years of experience. "Her grandmother?" Nia managed between breaths, pulling the mask slightly away from her face. "She's cleaning. Downtown offices. Night shift." She winced as another wave of tightness visibly squeezed her chest, and she leaned back against the thin pillow. "We'll keep trying her number," Marisol assured her, gently adjusting the nebulizer mask back into place. Her fingers brushed Nia's forehead in a small gesture of comfort. "Just focus on taking slow breaths for me. In through your nose if you can, out through your mouth." Ethan paced near the bed, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum in an uneven rhythm that matched his agitated thoughts. His tailored suit jacket was unbuttoned, tie askew as he ran his hand through his usually perfect hair. "I'll cover any expenses, whatever she needs, medication, specialists, follow-up care. Just make sure she gets everything." "No charity," Nia whispered firmly, even through her, wheezing. She fixed Ethan with a determined gaze that seemed impossibly mature for her years, her hand clutching the thin blanket. Marisol caught Ethan's eye and gave a slight shake of her head, her expression kind but firm. She adjusted one of Nia's monitor leads before speaking. "Right now, this is about keeping you safe tonight, Nia. Sometimes we all need a safety net, just for a little while. The important thing is getting you breathing properly again." The monitor beeped steadily as Nia's oxygen levels slowly improved from the dangerous lows they'd seen at arrival. The medication started working its way through her system, her breathing becoming less labored, the desperate gasping fading into more regular, if still strained, breaths. In the relative quiet, a soft humming filled the space. Nia's eyes were closed, her fingers tapping lightly against the blanket, and she was humming a hymn between breaths. Great is thy faithfulness. The melody rose and fell with each exhale, barely audible yet somehow filling the sterile room with unexpected warmth. Ethan recognized it from somewhere deep in his childhood memories. His mother's voice, singing in their old kitchen as sunlight streamed through yellow curtains. The scent of cinnamon and the feel of worn wooden chair rungs beneath his small fingers came rushing back. Without thinking, he found himself humming along, off-key and uncertain, his polished business persona momentarily forgotten. Nia's eyes opened in surprise, and for a moment they shared a small smile that bridged the vast differences between them. "You know it?" she asked, her voice stronger now, curious. "My mum." He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious as he tugged at his sleeve. "She used to sing it, Sunday mornings mostly, before church." He hadn't thought about those mornings in years, had locked them away with all the other memories that hurt too much to revisit. Marisol checked Nia's vitals again, her practiced fingers adjusting equipment and noting numbers on a chart. "Much better. Your numbers are coming up nicely. But we need to monitor you overnight. An asthma attack this severe. We can't risk sending you home yet. Sometimes they can return after the medication wears off." "But my grandma," Nia started, worry creasing her young forehead. Her fingers twisted anxiously in the blanket. "She'll be so scared if she comes home and I'm not there. And she needs to sleep before tomorrow's shift." "Still no answer?" The clerk called over from her station, receiver in hand. "We've tried 3 times, left messages at both numbers." Ethan stepped away from the bed, pulling out his phone with sudden decision. He moved to the corner of the room, shoulders squared, and dialed the hospital's administrative line, his voice taking on its business tone, the one that had closed billion-dollar deals and silenced boardrooms. "This is Ethan Hale. I'm authorizing payment for all expenses related to Nia Carter's treatment. Tonight." He paused, then added, his gaze drifting back to the small figure in the hospital bed. "And any other asthma-related admissions that come in from her neighborhood. Yes, I'll have my office send the paperwork in the morning. No, I don't need publicity on this." When he returned, Marisol was explaining the observation process to Nia, drawing a simple diagram on the back of a patient education pamphlet. "We'll keep you on oxygen. Check your peak flow readings regularly. That measures how well you're breathing out. The goal is to prevent any rebound attacks, which can sometimes be worse than the first one. I'll stay until your grandmother arrives," Ethan said, settling into the hard plastic chair beside the bed. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, and a coffee stain marked his cuff, but he didn't seem to notice as he arranged himself in the uncomfortable seat. "You don't have to," Nia said, but her voice was small, grateful. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the hospital blanket. "You probably have important meetings or something." "I know." He pulled out his tablet, trying to look busy rather than emotionally invested. "But I want to make sure you're okay. Nobody should be alone in a hospital." The words surprised him as they left his mouth, and he busied himself with his screen. Marisol smiled as she updated Nia's chart, her pen moving efficiently across the page. "I'll get you settled in Observation Bay 3. It has the best view of the courtyard lights. The night shift here is excellent. Monica will be your nurse, and she makes the best jokes. She keeps stickers in her pocket for brave patients." As they wheeled Nia's bed toward the observation area, Ethan walked alongside, still humming that hymn under his breath, the melody carrying him back through decades to a simpler time. His phone buzzed with missed calls and messages, the screen lighting up with urgent notifications from across the globe. But for once, he didn't reach for it. The observation bay was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on the polished floor. Nia's breathing had steadied, her color improved from the frightening grey-blue tinge earlier. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight as Marisol got her settled, arranging pillows and explaining each monitor with patient kindness. "Try to rest," she told Nia, adjusting the oxygen flow. "We'll keep trying to reach your grandmother. I promise someone will be checking on you every hour." Ethan stood awkwardly by the door, his tall frame looking out of place among the medical equipment. "I meant what I said. I'm not leaving until she gets here. I'll be right in that chair if you need anything." Just after midnight, the intercom dinged and the automatic doors sighed open somewhere down the corridor. Hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway as new voices joined the hospital's nocturnal rhythm. Ethan glanced toward the sound, then back at Nia's now peaceful face. The night was far from over, but for the first time in years, he felt himself exactly where he needed to be. Ruth Carter burst through the ER doors like a winter wind, her worn navy coat dusted with snow, her face etched with worry. Her sensible work shoes squeaked against the linoleum as she rushed to the nurse's station, the overhead fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across her tired features. The antiseptic smell of the hospital mingled with the cold air she'd brought in from outside. "I'm Ruth Carter, my granddaughter Nia." Her voice was steady but urgent, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles whitened. Behind her, other patients waited in various states of distress, the low hum of the busy emergency room a constant backdrop. Marisol looked up from her charts, recognition flashing in her eyes. She set down her pen and stood immediately, her scrubs slightly rumpled from the long shift. "She's stable, Mrs. Carter. Right this way. She's been asking for you." They walked briskly through the crowded corridor, passing rooms where monitors beeped and staff moved with practiced efficiency. Marisol's shoes made soft padding sounds against the floor as she led Ruth to Bay 3, where Nia dozed under thin hospital blankets, an oxygen monitor clipped to her finger. Her small chest rose and fell in a rhythm finally even and controlled, her dark braids spread across the white pillowcase. Ruth's shoulders dropped slightly at the sight of her granddaughter's safe, the tension in her face easing just a fraction. But she tensed again when she spotted Ethan standing near the window, his expensive coat draped over his arm. "Who are you?" she asked sharply, moving to stand between him and Nia's bed, her body language protective and wary. "Ethan Hale. I brought Nia in when—" he began, his voice calm and measured. "The Billionaire?" Ruth's eyes narrowed, recognition dawning. "From the news? The investment guy? What do you want with my granddaughter?" Ethan shifted his weight from one foot to another, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. His tailored suit seemed out of place among the stark hospital furnishings. "I was passing by when I saw her having trouble breathing on the bench near Westside Park. I just wanted to help. She couldn't reach you." "Help usually comes with strings in my experience," Ruth said, her voice low but firm, years of hard-learned wisdom evident in her tone. "We don't need charity that turns into debt. We manage on our own." "Mrs. Carter." Marisol intervened smoothly, stepping between them with practiced diplomacy. "Let's focus on Nia's care plan right now. She had a severe asthma attack, and we need to discuss prevention strategies going forward. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low when she arrived." The sound of voices roused Nia from her light sleep. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing tired but bright eyes. "Grandma?" she mumbled, her voice small and raspy. Ruth was at her side in an instant, all attention diverted from Ethan to her granddaughter. She stroked Nia's forehead tenderly, brushing back a stray braid. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry I couldn't answer. They don't let us keep phones during shift at the processing center. I came as soon as I got the message. "It's okay," Nia said, a small smile forming. "Mr. Hale knew the hymn. He sang it with me when I couldn't catch my breath. The one you taught me." Ruth raised an eyebrow at Ethan, surprise evident in her expression. He looked away, suddenly studying the monitor readings with intense interest, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Marisol pulled up a rolling stool and opened her tablet, the screen illuminating her face with a soft blue glow. "Nia needs a better management plan. I'm prescribing a spacer to use with her inhaler. It helps the medicine reach deeper into the lungs where it needs to work. Also a short course of steroids to reduce inflammation in her airways." "We'll make it work," Ruth said firmly, her tone leaving no room for doubt, though worry lines creased her forehead. "I'd like her to see Dr. Chen, our respiratory specialist, tomorrow." Marisol continued, her fingers tapping efficiently on the screen. "We need to identify what triggered this attack and develop a long-term strategy. Nia, can you think of anything different today? Something that might have started the trouble breathing?" Nia's forehead wrinkled in thought, her fingers plucking at the thin blanket. "It's worse at night, when the heater makes funny noises. And there's these black spots on the walls that smell funny when it rains. They're behind my bed and in the bathroom corner." "Mold," Marisol said, making notes with a concerned expression. "That could definitely trigger attacks, especially in children with asthma. What's your address? I'll note it for the specialist to review as part of her environmental assessment." As Ruth gave the address, her voice tinged with resignation, Ethan quietly typed it into his phone and sent it to his assistant with a brief note. Something about this situation nagged at him, demanded his attention in a way he couldn't explain, a feeling unfamiliar and persistent. "The building's old," Ruth acknowledged, adjusting Nia's blanket unnecessarily. "But we keep our unit clean. I scrub those spots whenever they appear, but they just come back. Some issues need more than cleaning," Marisol said gently, compassion evident in her eyes. "Environmental triggers like mold require structural solutions. The building owner should address it." "We can't just move," Ruth cut in, her voice tight with the reality of their situation. "Rent's impossible everywhere else. We've looked. There's nowhere affordable within an hour of my work." Ethan cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly. "Maybe there are other solutions." "We don't need you to solve our problems," Ruth said, but with less heat than before. She looked tired, the late hour and worry evident in the lines, around her eyes and the slump of her shoulders. The fluorescent lights emphasized the grey strands in her hair. "I respect that," Ethan said carefully, choosing his words with unusual deliberation, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "But maybe there are options that preserve dignity and solve problems at the same time. No strings attached." Ruth studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating. "You talk like someone who's used to being in control, someone who fixes things because they can." "I am," he admitted, meeting her eyes directly. "But tonight I'm just trying to help. Nothing more." Marisol handed Ruth some papers, the rustling sound loud in the moment of silence. "Here's the care plan and prescription information. The social worker will come by in the morning to discuss assistance programs for the medications. They can be quite expensive without coverage." Nia's eyes were drooping again, the medication making her drowsy, her small body fighting against sleep. Ruth settled into the plastic chair beside her bed, automatically reaching for her granddaughter's hand, her thumb making small circles on Nia's palm. The beeping of the monitor created a steady rhythm in the quiet room. Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket, breaking the moment. "Excuse me," he said, stepping into the hallway where nurses hurried past with charts and medication trays. "I need to take this." At 2:03 a.m., the screen lit up his face with a blue glow, displaying property records that made Ethan's stomach drop. The building where Ruth and Nia lived wasn't just any apartment complex. It was owned by Westside Holdings, a subsidiary of Hale Capital's real estate division. His company, his responsibility, the mold, the broken heating, all of it. Ethan stared at his phone screen, the blue light harsh in the dim hospital hallway. His fingers tightened around the device as he scrolled through the property records his assistant had sent. Carter Gardens Apartments, owned by Riverside Holdings LLC, which traced back through 3 more shell companies before landing squarely at Hale Capital's door. His own company, his responsibility. The realization hit him like a physical blow. While he'd been focused on quarterly reports and board meetings, families like Nia's had been living with broken heaters and toxic mold. The efficiency-driven part of his brain immediately started cataloging the risks: class action lawsuits, damaging headlines, regulatory investigations. But beneath that, something deeper and more uncomfortable stirred. Genuine shame. A cold, hollow feeling spread through his chest as faces flashed through his mind. Children like Nia, elderly residents, families just trying to get by while his company's negligence made them sick. He leaned against the wall, letting out a slow breath that fogged slightly in the too cool hospital air. Through the window of Nia's room, he could see Ruth dozing in her chair, still holding her granddaughter's hand. The sight made his chest tight. Ruth's face, even in sleep, carried the worry lines of someone who'd fought too many battles alone. Her fingers, wrapped protectively around Nia's smaller hand, told a story of fierce love and sacrifice that made Ethan's throat constrict. A soft voice called from inside. "Mr. Hale?" Nia was awake, her eyes reflecting the dim light from the monitors. He walked back into the room, careful not to wake Ruth. The little girl looked smaller against the white hospital sheets, the nasal cannula still delivering oxygen to help her struggling lungs. "The beeping's too loud," Nia whispered, gesturing at the heart monitor. Her fingers plucked nervously at the thin blanket. Could you hum that hymn again? It makes the beeping sound like a song." Ethan glanced at Ruth, still sleeping, her chest rising and falling with each breath, then pulled a chair closer to Nia's bed. The plastic legs scraped softly against the floor tiles. He began humming quietly, matching the rhythm to the steady pulse of the monitor. "Great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning." Nia's eyes drifted closed, a small smile on her face as the tension eased from her small shoulders. Ethan kept humming, watching the oxygen saturation numbers hold steady on the screen. Each beep reminded him of all the other children in that building, breathing in mold spores night after night, while his company collected rent through layers of corporate disguise. How many other kids had struggled to breathe? How many other grandmothers had sat in emergency rooms, frightened and exhausted? At 5:30 a.m., with Ruth and Nia both sleeping soundly, Ethan pulled out his phone again. The hallway's fluorescent lights had brightened slightly as the night shift prepared for morning rounds. His fingers moved swiftly across the screen as he composed an email to his executive team. "Emergency meeting 6:45 a.m. Urgent tenant safety matter requiring immediate attention. Attendance mandatory. Conference room A." He attached the property records and added a priority flag, taking a moment to double-check the documentation before sending. As he hit send, Marisol entered to check Nia's vitals, her scrubs fresh, but her eyes carrying the fatigue of the night shift. "You're still here," she said quietly, noting something on her tablet. She moved with practiced efficiency, checking the IV line and adjusting the oxygen flow without disturbing her young patient. "I needed to be." He stood, stretching his stiff muscles, feeling vertebrae pop after hours in the uncomfortable chair. "But I should go soon. There's work to do." Ruth stirred at their voices, blinking awake. She straightened in her chair, immediately alert, a mother's instinct to be ready when needed. Her eyes darted first to Nia, checking her condition, before turning to Ethan with a questioning look. Ethan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, before I leave, there's something you need to know." He paused, forcing himself to meet her eyes, to own the responsibility weighing on him. "I'm going to fix the building, not just for Nia, but for everyone living there. The repairs, the mold, the heating system, all of it." Ruth's expression hardened, skepticism written in the firm set of her jaw and the slight narrowing of her eyes. "Why? Because you feel guilty? Or because it makes a good story? Billionaire saves the day?" "Because it's right," he said simply, "and because I'm responsible." The admission felt both painful and freeing as it left his lips. "We don't need rescuers," Ruth said, her voice firm but not unkind. She adjusted her cardigan, pulling it tighter around her shoulders. "We need partners who keep receipts. Whatever you're planning, it better come with something in writing." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the weight of generations of broken promises in her words. "You'll have more than receipts. You'll have contracts, timelines, and a seat at the table where decisions are made. I promise." "Promises are just words until they're backed by action," Ruth replied, her steady gaze never wavering from his face, measuring his sincerity. "Then I'll prove it with action," Ethan said. He looked at Nia, peaceful in her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest more regular now, then back to Ruth. "Starting today." Marisol, who had been quietly checking the monitors and making notes in Nia's chart, spoke up. "I'll email you both Dr. Chen's direct number. Nia should be discharged later this morning, but she'll need follow-up care." She adjusted the blanket around Nia's shoulders with gentle hands. Ethan gathered his coat, feeling the weight of the night's revelation settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. At the door, he turned back one last time. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for showing me what partnership really means." He walked through the quiet hospital corridors as the first hints of dawn crept through the windows, painting the sterile white walls with soft golden light. Outside, the winter air bit at his face, sharp and clarifying, and frost crunched under his feet as he made his way to his waiting car. His breath formed small clouds in the frigid morning air as he pulled his phone out again, already making notes for the meeting ahead. By 6:12 a.m., with frost stinging his face and determination fueling his steps, Ethan was in the boardroom, cueing a grim slideshow. The empty chairs around the conference table would soon be filled with executives who had no idea that today would change everything. The Hale Capital boardroom buzzed with nervous energy as executives filed in for the early morning meeting. Ethan stood at the head of the conference table, his presentation already loaded on the wall screen. Property records, building code violations, and a single photo of black mold creeping across a basement wall. 6:45 on the dot, Caleb Rowe announced, straightening his tie as he took his seat. The CFO's perfectly pressed suit contrasted sharply with Ethan's rumpled shirt from the night before. "Though I must say, the urgency of this meeting escapes me. Property management isn't exactly our core business." Ethan waited until everyone was seated before speaking. "Last night, I met an 11-year-old girl named Nia Carter. She had an asthma attack on the street. When I took her to the ER, I learned that she lives in one of our buildings, a building with broken heating and toxic mold." "Our buildings?" someone asked. "Through 3 shell companies, yes. All roads lead back to us." Ethan clicked through to the ownership diagram. "We own the building where Nia and dozens of other families live in conditions that sent a child to the hospital." Caleb leaned forward, frowning. "Ethan, while this is unfortunate, we need to consider our fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. These legacy property issues..." "Legacy property issues?" Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp. "There's nothing legacy about a child who couldn't breathe last night. What I mean is, Caleb continued smoothly. We should distance ourselves from direct involvement. Perhaps sell the properties to a management company. Let them handle— No. Ethan's palm hit the table. We're not distancing. We're not deflecting. We're fixing this. Starting today. He clicked to the next slide. A bullet-pointed action plan. First, emergency inspections at Nia's building, today. Second, hotel vouchers for all tenant families until the heat and mold issues are resolved. Third, a complete audit of every residential property in our portfolio. The room erupted in murmurs. Caleb's face reddened. The cost implications are less than a class action lawsuit. Ethan cut in. But more importantly, they're necessary. Legal will prepare tenant communications and a public statement by noon. About that, said Sarah from PR, holding up her phone. Tanya Reid from the City Chronicle is already sniffing around. Someone tipped her about hotel vouchers being distributed. She's framing it as billionaire PR moves. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. Let her. We'll give her complete access. Inspection reports, repair schedules, everything. Total transparency. That's extremely risky, Caleb protested. We should control the narrative, limit our exposure. The narrative? Ethan's voice rose slightly. The narrative is that we failed these families. The narrative is that while we were counting profits, children couldn't breathe in their own homes. We don't get to control that narrative, Caleb. We only get to change it. With actions, not spin. He turned to the head of operations. Jim, I need certified inspectors at the Carter building by 9 a.m. and get emergency heaters delivered before nightfall. One for every unit. On it, Jim said, already typing on his laptop. Legal team, Ethan continued. Draft a clear communication for tenants. Include a dedicated phone line, answered by humans, not recordings, for reporting issues, and prepare temporary housing agreements for the hotel stays. The General Counsel nodded, making notes. Sarah, work with Tanya Reid. Give her whatever she needs, but make sure she understands this isn't about PR. It's about fixing what we broke. Caleb stood up, straightening his jacket. The board won't like this exposure. The shareholders will have to understand that doing the right thing sometimes costs money. Ethan finished. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out logistics and assignments. By 8:30, teams were dispatched, phones were ringing, and the machinery of corporate action was grinding into motion. At 9:15, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Tanya Reid. Care to comment on the sudden interest in tenant welfare? What changed? He typed back. Come to the Carter building at 2 p.m. See for yourself. No restrictions, full access. Satisfied that things were in motion, Ethan gathered the documents he needed. Inspection schedules, hotel voucher procedures, the new emergency maintenance hotline information. Everything with signatures, everything with deadlines. He remembered Ruth's words. We need partners who keep receipts. Well, he had receipts now. Real ones. His assistant caught him at the elevator. Mr. Hale, you have 3 board members demanding calls. They can wait, he said, checking his watch. I made a promise to a grandmother about keeping receipts. That comes first. The morning traffic parted around his car as he headed back to St. Gabriel's. In his briefcase were papers, names, phone numbers, and timelines. Everything Ruth had demanded, everything she deserved. At 10:27 a.m., he walked back through the ER doors with paper, names, phone numbers, and timelines. Ethan found Ruth in Nia's hospital room, helping her daughter sip water through a straw. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, making the medical equipment look less intimidating. Mr. Hale, Ruth said, her voice measured. Back with those receipts? He placed his briefcase on the rolling table. Everything we discussed and more. Marisol entered, checking Nia's vitals. Someone's breathing much better today. Nia smiled weakly. The medicine helped, But what about Marcus from 4B? His breathing's bad too. Ruth squeezed her daughter's hand. Always thinking of others, baby girl. Ethan spread out the documents. These are legally binding commitments. Heat and mold remediation starting today. Hotel vouchers for anyone who needs to relocate during repairs. And he hesitated, then continued. A full audit of every property Hale Capital owns, with public timelines for fixes. Ruth picked up the papers, reading carefully. Plain English. Yes, no legal jargon. These need to be posted where everyone can see them, Ruth said. In the lobby, by the mailboxes. Already planned. They'll be up this afternoon. Marisol leaned over, scanning the documents. What about ongoing healthcare support? One ER visit won't fix systemic issues. Ethan pulled out another paper. That's why I'm proposing this. A mobile clinic, every Saturday for 1 year, parked right on your block, staffed by St. Gabriel's medical partners. Marisol's eyebrows rose. Including asthma education, proper inhaler technique, spacer distribution? All of it, whatever the community needs. It has to help everyone, Nia insisted from her bed. Not just me. Promise? Ethan met her eyes. I promise. Everyone. Ruth set down the papers. These are good first steps, but our community needs more than promises from suits who've never set foot in our buildings. There's a tenant forum tonight at 7, at Pastor Lionel's church basement. If you're serious about partnership, you'll be there. Pastor Lionel Brooks? Ethan asked. He's been our voice through 3 different property managers. Ruth explained. He keeps the peace and speaks truth to power. You want our trust? Start with his. Ethan checked his phone. Board members were still demanding calls. Reporters were circling. But he remembered Nia's blue-tinted lips from last night, remembered the shame of discovering his company's neglect. I'll be there, he said, 7 o'clock. Bring those commitments in writing. Ruth said, 1 page, clear terms, something we can hold you to. Ethan nodded, then sat down to draft it right there. Ruth and Marisol looked over his shoulder, suggesting clearer language, stronger commitments. They settled on 4 main points. He signed it. Ruth witnessed it. Marisol notarized it. Now, Ruth said, let's see if your actions match your signature. By noon, the first inspection team arrived at the apartment building. Residents watched from their windows as men in work clothes carried testing equipment inside. An hour later, a truck delivered space heaters, good ones, not cheap plastic units that would break in a week. Mrs. Johnson from 2A stood in her doorway, arms crossed. 20 years I've lived here. Never seen such quick action. Is it real? Asked Mr. Rodriguez from across the hall. Or just for show? Ruth had come home to oversee things, leaving Nia in Marisol's capable hands. It's real if we make it real, she told her neighbors. Tonight at 7, Pastor Lionel's basement. We all need to be there. The building manager, who'd been mysteriously absent during previous complaints, suddenly appeared with clipboard in hand, looking nervous. Mr. Hale's office sent me the inspection schedule. He stammered. They want daily reports. Good, Ruth said firmly, because we'll be watching too. By mid-afternoon, the lobby was transformed. The usual peeling notices were replaced with clear, professional documents outlining commitments and contact numbers. The emergency maintenance line had already fielded 12 calls. A young mother with a toddler studied the mobile clinic notice. Free asthma checks, every Saturday, right here on our block. Ruth confirmed. Starting next weekend. My Tommy's been wheezing too, the mother said softly. Then we'll see you there. Ruth assured her. This help is for everyone. Tanya Reid from the City Chronicle showed up with her camera, snapping pictures of the space heater deliveries. Quite a change from yesterday, she commented to Ruth. Change is just beginning. Ruth replied. Real change happens in community, not corporate offices. That's why tonight matters. The reporter scribbled in her notebook. Will Mr. Hale really show up to face angry tenants? He better, Ruth said, because we have questions, and we have demands, and most importantly, we have his signature promising to listen. At 3 o'clock, Pastor Lionel himself arrived to check on preparations. His gentle voice carried authority earned through years of service. Chairs are set up, he told Ruth. Sound system's ready. How many you expect? Word's spreading fast, she said. Could be the whole building, maybe more. The pastor nodded, watching another space heater being carried inside. In 20 years of tenant meetings, this is the first time the owner's coming to listen, not tell. If he shows, Ruth said. He'll show, Pastor Lionel replied. Question is, will he hear? By 3:05 p.m., flyers for the 7 p.m. forum were being taped to every lobby wall. The church basement hummed with nervous energy. Metal chairs creaked under winter coats, and fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on cinder block walls. The scent of old coffee and floor polish hung in the air as residents huddled together, exchanging worried glances and hushed conversations. Hand-drawn signs about building safety were taped to the bulletin board, their corners curling with age. At 6:45, Pastor Lionel Brooks stood near the podium, his calm presence settling the restless crowd. His weathered hand smoothed down his simple button-up shirt as he surveyed the gathering. Remember, his soft voice carried authority across the room, quieting the murmurs. Tonight we speak truth, but with dignity. We're here for solutions, not just complaints. Each voice matters, but how we use those voices determines whether we'll be heard. Ruth sat in the front row beside Nia, who'd gotten special permission for a 2-hour pass from St. Gabriel's. The girl's breathing was better, but Ruth kept the rescue inhaler close, her fingers brushing against it in her pocket every few minutes. Nia's hair was neatly braided, and she wore her best sweater for the occasion, her eyes wide as she watched neighbors fill every available chair. You feeling okay? Ruth whispered, studying her granddaughter's face for any sign of distress. Nia nodded. I'm good, Grandma. Just nervous about so many people. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy door swung open, and Ethan walked in with a single assistant. No security, no lawyers, just his notebook and pen. His tailored coat was unbuttoned, and his tie slightly loosened, as if making a conscious effort to appear more approachable. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves, and several people straightened in their chairs. Pastor Brooks raised his hands, the simple gesture bringing instant quiet. Welcome, neighbors. Mr. Hale has come to listen to our concerns. His gentle voice held a backbone of steel. This is our home, our community. Mr. Hale is our guest tonight. Who would like to speak first? Mrs. Johnson from 2A stood shakily, her arthritis-bent fingers gripping a handwritten list. 3 winters I've had black mold in my bathroom, 3 winters of work orders pending, and nothing but excuses. My grandson can't visit because it triggers his asthma so bad he ends up in the emergency room. I've been putting down vinegar and baking soda myself, but it keeps coming back. Ethan wrote carefully in his notebook, his pen moving across the page with purpose, then looked up to meet her eyes. The remediation team starts tomorrow, Mom. Not just surface cleaning. We're replacing affected drywall and fixing the underlying moisture issues. You'll have a clean, dry home by next week. I've made sure your apartment is first on the list. Mr. Rodriguez from 4C rose next, pulling his worn cardigan tighter around his thin frame. My heater's been broken since November. My wife and I sleep in our coats. They keep saying parts are coming, but nothing ever happens. I'm 72 years old. Should I have to live like this? No, sir, you shouldn't. Ethan replied without hesitation. New heating systems are being installed building-wide, starting this week with the top floor and working down. Meanwhile, the space heaters delivered today are yours to keep, even after the repairs, and we'll be providing a credit on your next rent statement for the months you've been without proper heat. One by one, residents stood, peeling paint exposing children to lead, broken buzzers leaving elderly vulnerable, drafty windows driving up heating bills, slow repairs forcing families to live with hazards. Each complaint was a thread in a tapestry of neglect that had been years in the making. Ethan wrote everything down, asking clarifying questions about apartment numbers and specific issues, making no excuses for past failures. "Fine words," called someone from the back, a middle-aged man with calloused hands. "But we've heard promises before from men in nice suits. What makes tonight any different?" Pastor Brooks gestured to the commitment letter spread open on the table. "That's why we're putting it in writing, with timelines and accountability. Mr. Hale?" Ethan stood and moved to the podium, the paper crisp under his fingers. He read each point aloud, his voice steady. The mobile clinic drew murmurs of interest, especially when he mentioned pediatric specialists. The public audit raised eyebrows, with its promise of transparency. The commitment to local hiring for repairs brought hopeful glances between neighbors. When he finished, he signed it again, right there on the podium, the pen scratching loudly in the hushed room. "A copy for every tenant," Ruth insisted, rising from her chair. "In their mailbox tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight." Ethan nodded to his assistant, who stepped out to arrange the printing and distribution, the door closing softly behind him. Tanya Reed sat in a corner, recording everything on her small digital recorder while taking handwritten notes. Her skepticism showed in her furrowed brow and the tight line of her mouth, but she couldn't deny the concrete commitments being made right before her eyes. The journalist's fingers tapped thoughtfully against her notepad. "What about enforcement?" she asked, her clear voice cutting through the murmurs. "Who ensures these promises are kept when the cameras are gone and the spotlight moves on?" "The Tenants Association will monitor compliance," Ruth answered without missing a beat. "With regular reports to Pastor Brooks and the City Housing Authority. We'll have weekly check-ins and monthly inspections until every item is addressed." Her expression made it clear she would personally see to it. "And my email goes directly to every tenant," Ethan added, pulling business cards from his pocket and placing them on the table. "No filters, no gatekeepers. My assistant isn't here to block you. He's here to help make sure your concerns reach me directly." An elderly woman in a bright purple hat with a silk flower pinned to the side raised her hand, her wedding ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. "The mobile clinic. You said every Saturday?" "Yes, ma'am. 8 to 6, rain or shine." "What about folks from the next building over? My sister lives there. Her kid's got breathing troubles too. They're going to be turned away." Her question hung in the air, testing the limits of his commitment. The room got quiet. All eyes turned to Ethan, waiting. Someone coughed nervously. He looked at Nia, remembering her words from the hospital about her friends needing help too. Her eyes met his, questioning and hopeful at once. "The clinic is for everyone in the neighborhood," he said firmly. "No restrictions, no ID checks, no questions about which building you live in. If you need help, you're welcome. That's a promise." Relief rippled through the crowd like a wave. Someone started clapping, and others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the basement. A few amens rose from the back row where the church deacons sat. As the meeting wound down, people lingered in small groups, talking with new hope, comparing notes and sharing contact information. The mood had transformed from tension to cautious optimism. Ethan moved among them, listening more than speaking, jotting down additional concerns in his notebook. Nia tugged his sleeve while Ruth spoke with Pastor Lionel about the Tenants Association meeting schedule. In a small voice, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, she began to sing, "Great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning, new mercies I see." The simple melody carried thanks that words couldn't express, her clear voice rising pure and true in the cluttered basement. A few older women nodded appreciatively, some humming along. "My grandma taught me that song," she explained when she finished. "She says it helps remind us that good things can happen even when times are hard." At 9:12 p.m., after folding chairs scraped the floor and coffee cups hit trash bins, Ethan walked Ruth and Nia back to St. Gabriel's for the overnight. Streetlights cast long shadows as they walked, and Nia pointed out the stars visible between the tall buildings, naming the few constellations she could recognize in the city sky. The very next day, Saturday, 8 a.m., a white medical van with St. Gabriel's Mobile Health Unit in blue letters pulled up to the curb. Steam puffed from its exhaust into the cold morning air, billowing like ghostly clouds before dissipating. Marisol hopped out first, clipboard in hand, her dark hair tucked under a warm knit cap, followed by 2 nurses in matching blue scrubs and a respiratory therapist carrying an equipment case. "Let's set up inside the lobby," she directed with calm authority. "It's too cold out here for folks with breathing issues." They wheeled in folding tables with legs that squeaked against the pavement, portable privacy screens with fresh paper coverings, and cardboard boxes stuffed with medical supplies, inhalers, spacers, peak flow meters, and educational pamphlets. The building's lobby, despite its worn tiles with cracks zigzagging across the floor and flickering fluorescent light that hummed inconsistently overhead, would become their makeshift clinic space. Marisol walked the perimeter, mentally mapping stations for maximum efficiency while maintaining patient dignity. At 8:30, Ethan arrived wearing scuffed brown work boots and a plain navy winter coat zipped to his chin. No designer suit, no earpiece-wearing security detail, just him with a red metal toolbox under his arm and determination in his eyes. Nia, released from the hospital just last night, her colourful scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, spotted him through the smudged glass of the lobby door. "Mr. Ethan!" she called out, waving enthusiastically, her breath forming little clouds in the morning air. "Come meet everyone. They're all waiting to see you." She grabbed his free hand with surprising strength for someone recently hospitalized and led him down the cracked sidewalk to the corner bodega, where Mr. Patel, a man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, was carefully arranging apples and oranges outside his shop. The store owner's eyes crinkled with recognition as they approached. "Ah, so you're the one," Mr. Patel said, extending his weathered hand while adjusting his wool cap with the other. "Nia hasn't stopped talking about you since yesterday. She tells me you're fixing things up. Good. These families, they need help sometimes. I keep a list in my drawer, store credit when the month runs long. Nobody goes hungry if I can help it." Ethan shook his hand, feeling the calluses of hard work. "That's generous of you. More than generous. Community takes care of its own," Mr. Patel replied simply, with the quiet dignity of someone who lived by those words daily. "We may not have much, but we share what we have." Next, Nia introduced him to Ms. Howard, a grandmother with silver-streaked hair and laugh lines around her eyes, bundled in a bright red coat that stood out like a cardinal against the grey buildings. She sat on her concrete stoop, watching several small children chase each other in tight circles, their giggles floating up like music. "Night shift parents need sleep," she explained, keeping one watchful eye on the children while adjusting a little girl's hat that had gone askew. "I watch their little ones. Been doing it 15 years now. Know every child on this block by name and which ones need extra attention." A group of teenagers were sweeping the next stoop, hip-hop playing softly from a phone propped against a flower pot. Their brooms moved in rhythm with the beat as they cleared away yesterday's debris. Nia waved to them with familiarity. "That's Marcus, Jade, and Andre," she said, pointing to each one. "They clean up every weekend, rain or shine. Say it shows pride in the block. Nobody asked them to. They just started doing it last summer and kept going." Inside the lobby, the clinic was taking shape under Marisol's experienced guidance. She had organized stations with precision. Intake forms at the first wobbly table, covered with a clean white cloth. Vital signs at the second, where a nurse unpacked blood pressure cuffs, and consultation behind the white privacy screens that created small rooms within the open space. The respiratory therapist, a woman with gentle hands and a patient smile, was demonstrating proper inhaler technique with a clear plastic training device. "Remember," she explained to a mother with worried eyes and her young son who fidgeted with his jacket zipper, "the spacer helps the medicine get deep into your lungs where it needs to go. Count to 10 slowly after each puff, like this. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi." People began trickling in. First, just residents from Naya's building with curious glances and hesitant steps. Then neighbors from nearby blocks who'd heard through the community grapevine. The lobby filled with voices, questions, and the sounds of medical equipment being unpacked. Marisol moved between stations with practiced efficiency, handing out peak flow meters with colorful mouthpieces and home trigger checklists printed in both English and Spanish, the papers crinkling as she pointed to important sections. "Check for mold behind furniture and under sinks," she advised a young father balancing a toddler on his hip. "Keep bathrooms ventilated after showers. No smoking inside, ever, not even by open windows. It sticks to walls and fabrics." A tenant with graying temples and paint-stained jeans approached Ethan, carrying a screwdriver with a worn handle. He eyed Ethan with a mixture of skepticism and challenge, a half-smirk playing on his lips. "Hey, Mr. Moneybags, can you do more than sign checks? Door closes broken again. Slams shut on the little ones if you're not careful." Ethan picked up his toolbox, the metal handle cool against his palm. "Show me." For the next 20 minutes, he worked on the hydraulic arm that controlled the heavy front door, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. Sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms rarely seen outside the boardroom. He adjusted springs with careful turns, tightened loose screws, and tested the door's swing repeatedly until it closed smoothly with just the right amount of resistance. "Not bad, Mr. Ethan," someone called out from a small cluster of observers, and the nickname stuck, spreading through the growing crowd. The formality of Mr. Hale melted away like frost in sunshine as he moved through the gathering, asking questions about other needed repairs, taking notes in a small pad he pulled from his pocket, helping where he could, holding a ladder steady, checking a wobbly railing, promising to return with proper tools for bigger jobs. More people arrived, word having spread through phone calls and text messages. A grandmother with arthritic hands getting her first ever peak flow reading, her eyes widening at the numbers. Teenagers in basketball jerseys asking about sports-induced asthma between fist bumps. Parents with tired eyes learning about dust mite covers for bedding while bouncing fussy infants. The clinic handled each case with unhurried respect and care, Marisol's team adapting to the space limitations with creative problem-solving. Ruth stood at the curb, arms crossed against the chill, watching the scene unfold with cautious hope in her observant eyes. She noticed how Marisol treated everyone with quiet dignity, kneeling to speak with children at eye level, how the nurses took time to explain things clearly without medical jargon, how Ethan pitched in without trying to take over, listening more than speaking. The scene wasn't perfect. One clipboard wasn't enough, causing waits between stations. They needed more chairs for elderly patients, and the lighting was poor for reading small print. But it was a start, something real taking root in concrete soil. By noon, the clinic had logged 46 visits on their wrinkled sign-in sheets, and Marisol scheduled follow-ups for next Saturday, writing appointments on small cards that people tucked carefully into wallets and purses like precious things. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lobby as the mobile clinic wound down. Ruth helped Marisol pack away the last of the medical supplies while Ethan reviewed the day's numbers with the staff. 46 visits, he muttered, rolling up his sleeves. We'll need more staff next week. As he reached for a box, his sleeve rode up, revealing a simple silver bracelet. Ruth's hands froze mid-fold on the privacy screen. There, catching the fluorescent light, was a small charm engraved with 3 letters. HHF. The sight transported her back 6 years. She'd been working 3 jobs, barely keeping up with rent, when her sister got sick. The medical bills had pushed them to the edge of eviction. Then one day, an envelope appeared. 3 months' rent paid in advance through something called the Hale Hope Fund. The note inside, handwritten in elegant script, read simply, "So you never feel indebted." Ruth's throat tightened at the memory. She'd never known who was behind it, had always assumed it was an anonymous angel. But that bracelet, that charm, she said quietly, causing Ethan to look up. HHF, Hale Hope Fund? He touched it absently. Yes, my mother started it. His voice softened. She wore this bracelet every day. 6 years ago. Ruth began carefully. When my sister was sick, the fund paid our rent. There was a note. Ethan's eyes widened. So you never feel indebted. They finished together. That was my mother's signature phrase, he said, sitting heavily on a folding chair. She believed help should lift people up, not weigh them down. Ruth pulled up another chair. I never knew who to thank. Your mother? She kept it quiet? Always did. Ethan twisted the bracelet. She handled the fund personally, never wanted publicity. After she passed, He swallowed hard. I let the foundation become more about tax write-offs than real help. Got too focused on building the business. The note changed everything for us, Ruth said. Not just the money, the dignity of it. No strings, no shame. Just help when we needed it most. Through the lobby windows, they could see crews installing new heaters in the building. The whir of drills and clank of metal echoed down the halls. Legacy is what you prove today, Ruth added, her voice firm but gentler than before. Your mother knew that. Now it's your turn to show what kind of help really means something. A door opened, and Tanya Reed walked in, notebook in hand. She'd been interviewing residents all afternoon about the changes. Mrs. Carter, she called, do you have a moment? I'd love to hear about your experience with all this. Ruth straightened. Happy to talk, but let's be clear. This isn't about saviors swooping in. It's about what happens when people with power finally listen to their neighbors. Tanya nodded, pen poised. Tell me about the community here. What makes it strong? For the next hour, Ruth shared stories. Mr. Patel's quiet generosity, Ms. Howard's childcare network, the teenagers who kept the block clean. She mentioned the anonymous help she'd once received, but focused on how it had enabled her to help others in turn. Meanwhile, Ethan coordinated with a local hotel. Families who wanted to avoid the noise and dust of Monday's scheduled mold removal could have rooms for as long as needed. No credit cards required, no questions asked. Just like your mum would have done it, Ruth observed, overhearing his calls. He looked at the bracelet again. I forgot what this really meant, got lost in spreadsheets and stock prices. Well, Ruth said, watching another heater being carried inside. Seems like you found your way back. The afternoon light was fading when the last of the day's work wrapped up. Every apartment now had heat. Mold remediation teams would arrive Monday morning. Hotel vouchers had been distributed to anyone who wanted them. As dusk settled at 6:07 p.m., the block felt warmer, if only by a few degrees of trust. Sunday passed with clinic follow-up calls and lobby flyers. Now it was Monday, 8:15 a.m. The morning light revealed white vans lining the curb, each marked Professional Mold Remediation in bold blue letters. Workers in protective white suits and respirators carried equipment into the building, looking like astronauts against the worn brick facade. Ethan stood in the lobby, reviewing the day's schedule with the head of maintenance. "Every unit gets inspected, documented, and treated," he insisted. "No cutting corners." The whir of industrial air scrubbers filled the hallways. Bright yellow notices detailed the work schedule in English and Spanish, posted at eye level on every floor. Residents stopped to read them, some taking photos with their phones. "Mr. Ethan," Ms. Howard called from the stairwell. "My grandson wants to know if the machines are robots." He smiled, grateful for the moment of lightness. "Just very thorough cleaning equipment, but they do sound like robots, don't they?" In the makeshift command center, a folding table near the mailboxes, a young IT specialist from Hale Capital demonstrated the new maintenance tracking website. "Every work order, inspection report, and air quality reading gets logged here in real time," she explained to Ruth and the tenant committee. "That's fine for folks with computers," Ruth noted. "But what about everyone else?" "Already handled," Ethan replied, gesturing to a bulletin board where printed summaries hung in clear plastic sleeves. "Updated daily, plus a QR code for smartphone access." Across town at St. Gabriel's, Marisol arranged chairs in the church hall for her noon asthma education session. She laid out peak flow meters, spacers, and handouts showing common asthma triggers. "Remember," she told the gathering crowd, "knowledge is power. The more you understand about asthma, the better you can manage it." Nia sat in the front row, demonstrating proper inhaler technique to younger kids. Her breathing was stronger now, her confidence growing as she helped others. At the local newspaper office, Tanya stared at her computer screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her draft highlighted the community's role in driving change, but her editor's comments pushed for more drama. "Need more conflict," the margin note read. "Billionaire angle sells better than cooperation." Tanya sighed and opened a new document. She'd find a way to tell the true story, how pressure and partnership had created real change. Back at Hale Capital, Caleb paced Ethan's office, studying market reports. "Stock's down 3 points, he reported. "Nothing catastrophic, but the board's nervous about this hands-on approach. They're worried about optics fatigue, too much visibility in one building while others wait their turn." "They'll have to keep waiting," Ethan replied, checking his phone. Another text from Marisol. 25 people at the asthma class, all receiving follow-up appointments. "We're doing this right, building by building, starting here." He touched the silver bracelet on his wrist, remembering his mother's way of helping. Thorough, quiet, and always with dignity. As evening approached, residents began gathering in the lobby. Someone had brought cookies. Mr. Patel arrived with hot tea in paper cups. The air scrubbers hummed behind sealed doors, but down here, the mood was cautiously celebratory. "We should document this," Ruth suggested, pulling out her phone. "Show what change looks like." They assembled beneath the new notification board. Families, elderly residents, teenagers who'd helped distribute flyers. Ethan started to step back, but Ruth waved him in. "You're part of this too now," she said. "Just don't stand in the front." The photo captured it all. The clear emergency contact numbers, the maintenance tracking sheets, the QR codes for digital access, and most importantly, the faces of a community beginning to trust again. By 8:42 p.m., Monday, with the machines humming behind sealed doors, neighbors finally slept in rooms that felt safer. The very next day, Tuesday 5:30 p.m., warmth and spices filled the church basement. Folding tables stretched end to end, draped with mismatched tablecloths and loaded with steaming crockpots. The fluorescent lights cast a gentle glow over dozens of familiar faces from the block. Ms. Howard ladled her famous chili into paper bowls, while Mr. Patel arranged samosas on paper plates. The respiratory therapist from Saturday's clinic chatted with a young mother about proper inhaler cleaning. Marisol moved between groups, accepting hugs and updates on breathing improvements. 3 days without wheezing, one mother reported proudly, her son demonstrating his peak flow meter technique to a younger child. Ruth supervised the "What's been done, what's next" bulletin board, methodically pinning up inspection reports and work orders. Each document represented a promise kept. Completed mold treatments, installed heaters, scheduled maintenance checks. Below these, a clear timeline showed upcoming improvements, each with dates and contact numbers. Ethan lingered near the back wall, watching the scene unfold. He felt oddly nervous. Board meetings never made him sweat like this simple gathering did. A child darted past him, chasing friends between the tables, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls. "Mr. Ethan," Nia called from across the room. "Come see what we made!" He threaded his way through the crowd to where Nia stood beside a poster covered in photos. There was the clinic van on its first day, volunteers unloading supplies, Marisol teaching proper inhaler technique. In one corner, someone had caught him fixing the front door, screwdriver in hand. "The door's staying shut now," Nia said with a grin. "No more cold air getting in." Before Ethan could respond, Pastor Brooks called for everyone's attention. The room quieted as Nia made her way to the front, standing tall beside the old upright piano. "Nia would like to share something special," the pastor announced, smiling warmly. The first notes of "Great is thy faithfulness" filled the basement. Nia's voice rose clear and strong, without a trace of the wheeze that had haunted her just days ago. Ethan felt his throat tighten as she moved through the verses he'd hummed with her in the hospital. "Morning by morning, new mercies I see." Her grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. Marisol squeezed the hand of an elderly patient. Even the running children stopped to listen. When the last note faded, the applause was thunderous. Nia beamed, taking a small bow before running to hug her grandmother. "That girl's got spirit," Ruth said, appearing at Ethan's elbow with 2 plates of chili. She handed him one. "Almost as much spirit as a certain billionaire who knows his way around a screwdriver." Ethan accepted the plate with a chuckle. "I'm full of surprises." "That you are?" Ruth's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. Who knew fixing things could be so simple? "And so complicated," Ethan added, thinking of the meetings, paperwork, and resistance he'd faced. "But worth it," Ruth said firmly, watching as Nia demonstrated her improved breathing to the clinic staff. The evening flowed on, plates being refilled, stories shared, children darting between adults with cookies in hand. Tanya moved through the crowd with her camera, capturing moments that told the real story. The bulletin board full of proof, neighbors helping neighbors, dignity restored through action rather than charity. As the clock neared 9, families began gathering their empty containers and bundling up against the night air. The maintenance tracking website showed all heaters functioning properly, ready for the evening chill. Ethan helped stack chairs, waving off thanks from Pastor Brooks. Outside, streetlights cast warm pools on the sidewalk as neighbors walked home in groups, their breath visible in the cold air. Through open windows, the soft hum of working heaters carried on the night breeze. At 10:11 p.m., the lights clicked off in the church, and the smell of chili still clung to Ethan's coat. The chili-scented warmth of celebration faded fast. At 10:30 p.m., as most residents settled in for the night, a crackling sound echoed through the third-floor hallway. Then came the smell. Sharp, Electrical. Wrong. Smoke curled from behind a wall panel where decades-old wiring had finally given up. Within minutes, orange flames licked the yellowed wallpaper. A teenage boy, Marcus, spotted it first while taking out his family's trash. He pounded on doors, shouting, "Fire!" as smoke filled the corridor. Mrs. Chen from 3B stumbled in the thickening haze, her nightgown brushing the floor. Marcus grabbed her arm, guiding her toward the stairs as the building's fire alarm finally blared to life. Ethan's phone buzzed at 10:42 p.m. He was just stepping out of the shower, still processing the evening's success. The caller ID showed the building's emergency line. "Fire trucks are rolling," the security monitoring service reported. "Third floor, electrical origin." He yanked on jeans and a grey hoodie, still damp from rushing. "Not the new work?" he demanded, already running to his car. "No, sir. Old wiring in the walls. Predates current repairs." Red and blue lights strobed against buildings as Ethan turned onto the block. 3 fire engines were already on scene, hoses snaking up the front steps. Residents huddled on the sidewalk in bathrobes and hastily grabbed coats, some still coughing from the smoke. Ethan spotted Marcus sitting on the curb, wheezing slightly. The boy had helped 4 neighbors evacuate before the smoke got too thick. Without hesitating, Ethan ran to the clinic van still parked nearby, a small blessing, and yanked open the doors. "Let's get you checked out," he said, helping Marcus inside where emergency supplies waited. Marisol had trained him on the basic nebulizer setup just days ago. His hands shook slightly as he connected the tubing. Mrs. Chen joined them in the van, accepting an oxygen mask with trembling fingers. Through the windows, Ethan saw phones raised, recording. His own phone buzzed constantly. Caleb, legal, PR, all demanding updates. At 11:15 p.m., the first social media posts hit. Breaking. Fire at Hale-owned building. Photos of smoke and emergency vehicles spread rapidly. Comments piled up. Same building with the mold? What else is wrong there? PR stunt backfiring? Caleb's texts grew increasingly frantic. Media requesting statement. Legal says minimal response. Stock futures already dropping. Need to distance company now. Ethan ignored them all, focusing instead on Marcus and Mrs. Chen. The paramedics cleared them both. Smoke inhalation, but no serious injuries. Other residents were already being allowed back inside, except for the 3rd floor. Fire investigators worked efficiently, tracing the source to a junction box installed in the 1970s. Wiring this old, it was a matter of time, the chief explained, shining his flashlight on corroded copper. Not connected to any recent work. These walls have needed updating for years. The truth of that statement hit Ethan hard. Years of neglect. His neglect. Not just mold and heat, but the bones of the building itself had been ignored while he chased bigger deals. Ruth appeared at his elbow as midnight approached. She'd rushed over as soon as she heard. "Everyone's accounted for," she reported. "Pastor Brooks is opening the church for anyone who needs a place tonight." Ethan nodded, watching the firefighters roll up their hoses. The hallway above was a black wound in the building's side, visible through broken windows. Water dripped down the brick facade, catching the emergency lights. His phone lit up with a draft statement from legal. "While we regret this incident, preliminary investigation suggests no connection to current remediation efforts." He deleted it without reading further. Instead, he typed quickly. "I'll be at the building all night. My team is arranging hotels for affected residents, and emergency electricians are en route. This is on us. We'll fix it right." Caleb called immediately. "You can't admit liability like that. The lawyers are—" Ethan cut him off. "The lawyers aren't standing here looking at families in pajamas on the sidewalk. Send the electricians. Send the contractors. Whatever it costs." He walked the building with the fire marshal, noting every violation, every aging system that needed replacement. The scope of needed repairs expanded with each floor. In the third-floor hallway, soot coated the ceiling in streaks of accusation. By 1:18 a.m. Wednesday, the fire was out, but the damage to walls and trust was fresh and raw. The Wednesday morning sun cast long shadows through the Hale Capital boardroom windows. Ethan sat alone at the massive table, staring at his phone. The screen displayed an email from HR, time-stamped 8:07 a.m. Effective immediately. Suspension of duties pending internal review of recent unauthorized commitments and potential breach of fiduciary responsibility. His security badge already showed access restricted when he'd tried to enter through the executive entrance. They'd let him in anyway. One last courtesy before the axe fell. At 9:30 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. Insurance company flagged Nia's file. Specialist appointment cancelled. What games are you playing? He wasn't. That was the truth that burned worst of all. The system was just doing what systems do, protecting itself, finding connections, raising red flags. His throat felt tight as he typed back. Working on it. Give me an hour. But when he called the insurance company, they transferred him 4 times before landing at a dead end. The authorization is automatically suspended due to the ongoing property incident investigation. The final representative explained mechanically. We'll need documentation clearing the patient of any involvement. She's 11 years old. Ethan snapped. She needs that appointment. I understand, sir, but protocol requires... He hung up and pressed his forehead against the cool glass window. 34 floors below, the city crawled with morning traffic, everyone moving with purpose while he stood frozen. His phone buzzed again. Tanya this time. My editor killed the feature. Running with tech billionaires, PR stunt ends in flames instead. I fought for the real story. I'm sorry. At 10:45 a.m., Caleb appeared in the doorway, face carefully blank. The board meeting's starting. They're requesting you don't attend. Ethan nodded once, shoulders stiff. Where are we on the electrical contractors? All work is paused pending legal review. Caleb hesitated. Look, you need to step back. Let the PR team handle messaging. We can spin this... Stop! Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp. Just... stop. After Caleb left, Ethan sat in the emptiness until his phone buzzed yet again. Ruth. Pastor Brooks offered to host a tenant meeting tonight. But honestly, I don't know what to tell people anymore. Trust takes time to build and seconds to break. He started to reply, then deleted the words. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he'd fix it? Promises felt hollow now. At noon, he took the elevator down to the storage level. The fluorescent lights hummed as he used his key. They hadn't deactivated that yet, to enter the records room. In the back corner sat 3 cardboard boxes labeled HHF Archives, the Hale Hope Fund, his mother's quiet legacy of helping people who'd never know her name. Dust puffed up as he opened the first box. Inside were carefully organized binders full of aid records, each one annotated in his mother's neat handwriting. Medical bills paid, rent covered, school supplies provided. No fanfare, no press releases, just help given freely. In the second box, he found training materials she'd developed for the foundation staff. One page was dog-eared, marked with a yellow sticky note. He recognized her handwriting immediately. Mercy is not efficient. It is good. Do the good thing anyway. Ethan sat back on his heels, the words burning into his vision. How had he drifted so far from this? When had shareholder value and quarterly projections become more important than simply doing good? The third box held legal documents, the original foundation charter, tax forms, grant guidelines. His mother had built something lasting, something that survived her passing. Until he'd let it go dormant, too busy chasing bigger deals to maintain her quiet work. At 2 p.m., He spread the documents across the storage room floor. Structure emerged from the chaos, a framework for sustainable giving that answered to community needs, not market whims. His mother had created a model that could work again, updated for today's challenges. His phone buzzed. The board had reached their decision: extended suspension, possible termination pending further review. He barely glanced at it. Instead, he began taking notes, drawing from his mother's template but expanding it. Community trust, legally separate from Hale Capital. Resident governance, transparent funding, real accountability. The afternoon light faded in the windowless room as he worked. At 3:55 p.m., he gathered his notes and reached for his phone. The pastor's number was still in his recent calls. This wasn't about PR anymore. It wasn't even about his job. This was about building something that would outlast both, something that would make his mother proud. At 4:02 p.m., the church line rang twice before the pastor answered with a gentle, "I'm listening." The wooden pews creaked as people filed into Pastor Brooks's church that Wednesday evening. The usual peaceful quiet of the sanctuary felt charged with tension. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across worried faces. Ethan stood at the front, dressed in a simple grey sweater and khakis. No suit, no tie, no corporate armor. His hands were steady, but his face looked tired, marked by sleepless nights since the fire. "Thank you all for coming," Pastor Brooks began, his deep voice carrying to the back rows. "Mr. Hale has asked to address the community directly, without press or publicity teams." Ruth sat in the front row, arms crossed, watching carefully. Beside her, Marisol had come straight from her hospital shift, still in scrubs. The church was nearly full. Tenants, neighbors, clinic volunteers, even Mr. Patel from the bodega had closed early to attend. Ethan stepped forward. Under the lights, he looked younger somehow, more human. He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just for the fire, but for years of neglect that made it possible. While I was focused on building Hale Capital's portfolio, I lost sight of the people living in our buildings. That failure is mine." He paused, meeting eyes across the room. "But saying sorry isn't enough. You need more than words. You need lasting change that doesn't depend on my good intentions or the company's PR needs." From his messenger bag, he pulled out a thick folder and held it up. "This is the legal framework for the Hale Hope Renewal Trust. It's named after my mother's foundation, but it will be entirely independent from both me and Hale Capital." Murmurs rippled through the pews. Ethan continued, "The trust will be funded initially by the sale of my personal art collection and other assets, approximately $68 million. It will be governed by a board of community leaders, including Ruth Carter, Pastor Brooks, and Marisol Vega, if they're willing to serve." Ruth straightened in her seat, surprise flickering across her face. Ethan went on, laying out the specifics. "The funds will be legally restricted to 3 purposes. First, immediate code compliance upgrades for all properties. Second, rent assistance for any tenants displaced during repairs. Third, a permanent endowment for the mobile clinic program." He moved to a folding table that had been set up, near the altar. "The trust documents are here. I'm ready to sign them tonight, with witnesses and a notary present. But first, I want Ruth to read through every line." Ruth stood slowly, her worn sneakers squeaking on the floor. She approached the table and picked up the papers, adjusting her reading glasses. The room fell silent as she began to read aloud, her clear voice precise and questioning. Section 3.2, Quarterly Public Reports Required. Section 4.1, Board Composition and Term Limits. She paused, looking up. "We need a rotating tenant seat. Someone who lives in the building should always have a vote." "Agreed?" Ethan pulled out a pen and added the provision in neat handwriting. 1-year terms, elected by residents. Ruth nodded and continued reading. For nearly an hour, she went through every clause, asking questions, suggesting adjustments. Ethan agreed to each reasonable change, writing them in by hand while the notary witnessed. Finally, Ruth looked up. "This is real. Once you sign, it can't be undone?" "It's irrevocable," Ethan confirmed. "The assets transfer immediately. Even if I'm fired tomorrow, this trust belongs to the community." Pastor Brooks stepped forward. "Perhaps we should pray before the signing." The congregation bowed their heads as his gentle voice filled the space. "Lord, guide these hands that would turn wounds into healing and fear into hope." When he finished, Ethan picked up the pen. His signature was clear and unhurried. Ruth signed next, then Pastor Brooks, then Marisol. The notary's stamp made a final official thud. From the back of the church came a small sound, clapping. It was Nia, standing with her grandmother. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone. Some still watched cautiously, arms crossed. But something had shifted in the air. Mr. Patel stood up. "The clinic. It will still help everyone? Not just building residents?" "Everyone," Ethan confirmed. "The trust's mandate includes the whole neighborhood." More clapping spread through the pews. A few people stood. Ruth remained at the table, running her finger along the signatures, as if making sure the ink was really there. Marisol began organizing the documents into neat stacks, her nurse's efficiency taking over. She labeled copies for each board member, for the legal files, for the public record. By 9:21 p.m., notarized copies were stacked next to the coffee urn. The next day, Thursday, 9:00 a.m., a shaky phone video appeared on social media. The footage, shot during Tuesday's potluck, showed Nia standing in the church basement. Her clear voice carried the melody of "Great is thy faithfulness, strong and steady. No wheezing, no pauses for breath." Jenny Martinez, Nia's 7th grade classmate, had posted it with a simple caption. "She helped everyone. Can we help her breathe?" By 10 o'clock, St. Gabriel's Charitable Care Fund started receiving donations. $5, $20, whatever people could spare. Not a single check was made out to Ethan or Hale Capital. The donors' notes were simple. "For Nia's breathing," and "Help her stay healthy." Ruth sat in the hospital waiting room, watching the notification numbers climb on her phone. She hadn't asked for this. Would never have asked. But there was something different about this help. It came from neighbors, teachers, parents of Nia's classmates. People who knew her granddaughter's smile and wanted to keep it bright. At 11:30 a.m., Dr. Sarah Chen, the respiratory specialist, called Ruth into her office. "The hospital has authorized Nia's full treatment plan," she explained, sliding over the paperwork. "The Charitable Care Fund coverage, combined with the independence of the new Trust's clinic program, meets all our criteria." Ruth studied the authorization carefully. "This isn't because of corporate pressure?" "No." Dr. Chen shook her head firmly. "The Trust's legal structure is separate from Hale Capital. This is based purely on the established charitable care guidelines and the clinic's committed resources." Around noon, the city inspector's report arrived. Ruth read it in the hospital cafeteria, coffee growing cold beside her. The fire's cause was clear: decades-old wiring that predated the current remediation work. The Trust's repair plan was deemed sound, with added electrical system upgrades now included in the scope. Tanya Reid's article went live at 2:00 p.m. The headline read, "Beyond Corporate Charity, a New Model of Community Partnership." The piece dove deep, explaining the Trust's independent structure and governance model. Scanned pages of the Trust documents, shared with permission, showed the handwritten additions and amendments from Wednesday night. "Dignity means we decide with him, not after him," Ruth was quoted saying. The article detailed how residents would have direct input on repair priorities and ongoing maintenance through the rotating tenant board seat. By 4 o'clock, public support was building. Local community groups praised the trust's transparency. Housing advocates highlighted the governance model as a potential template for other neighborhoods. At 5:30 p.m., Hale Capital's board reconvened. Under pressure from the positive press and the trust's clear legal framework, they voted to reinstate Ethan. His new mandate was specific: either institutionalize these reforms across all properties or step aside for someone who would. The clinic van arrived for evening hours at 6, headlights sweeping across the block. Marisol stepped out, carrying a box of new spacers and peak flow meters. A small line had already formed, not just building residents, but neighbors from 3 blocks over. Ruth watched from her window as the van set up. Her phone buzzed with a text from Naya. "Breathing test all good. Coming home tomorrow." She smiled, then pulled up Ethan's number. He answered on the first ring. "Ruth, is everything okay?" "Keep listening," she said simply. "That's all. Just keep listening." "I will," he replied quietly. As Thursday slipped into night, the clinic van headlights traced a gentle arc across the church wall. On Friday afternoon, Nia sat in the specialist's treatment room at St. Gabriel's Hospital. The late winter sun streamed through the window, casting warm squares of light across the pale blue walls. The nebulizer hummed steadily beside her, its mist carrying medicine deep into her lungs. Marisol adjusted the mask carefully over Nia's nose and mouth. "Nice and snug," she said with a gentle smile. "Remember what we practiced. Slow breaths in, count to 5, then out." Ruth sat on Nia's left side, holding her hand. The chair on Nia's right creaked as Ethan settled into it, looking almost comically large in the pediatric room's furniture. "You're doing great, sweetheart," Ruth murmured, squeezing Nia's fingers. The nebulizer's steady hiss filled the quiet room. Ethan began to hum softly, the familiar notes of "Great is thy faithfulness," rising and falling like a lullaby. After a moment, Nia joined in, her humming clear and strong through the mask. No wheezing, no catching, just pure melody. Marisol checked the nebulizer's timer. 5 more minutes, she said. "Your oxygen levels are perfect." When the treatment finished, Nia's smile was bright enough to rival the sunlight. "I can breathe all the way down," she said, pressing a hand to her chest in wonder. The next morning, Saturday, dawned clear and cold. By 10 o'clock, a small crowd had gathered outside the apartment building. The newly repaired sections were ready to reopen. Fresh paint gleaming on the walls, every wire inspected and upgraded, smoke detectors blinking reassuringly. But what drew the most attention was the mural stretching across the lobby wall. Neighborhood children had designed it over the past week, a vibrant scene of their block in all seasons, with the clinic van, the church steeple, and dozens of small figures holding hands in a chain of community. Above it all, musical notes floated like birds, carrying the first line of Nia's hymn. At 11:30, the Hale Hope Renewal Trust Board convened its first regular session in the church basement. Ruth sat at the head of the folding table, her posture straight and dignified. Pastor Brooks and Marisol flanked her, while Ms. Howard, this month's rotating tenant representative, reviewed agenda items with careful attention. Ethan sat among them, not above them, his notebook open and pen ready. No executive chair, no corporate backdrop, just a man in a sweater taking notes about water heater maintenance schedules and playground equipment repairs. "The dignity clause is now active across all Hale properties," he reported, passing out printed copies. "Every building has transparent maintenance logs posted in the lobby and online. The hotlines are staffed 24/7 by real people, not recordings. And tenant review councils are being established this month, following our model here." Tanya Reid moved quietly around the room with her camera, capturing the scene. Her lens found small moments of triumph. Neighbors checking the new maintenance board, children racing through freshly painted hallways, the clinic calendar posted through December with every Saturday marked in bold. At noon, the block gathered for another potluck. Tables groaned under covered dishes, and the smell of Ruth's famous chili filled the air. She stood at the serving station, steam rising from the huge pot. With a small smile, she held out the ladle to Ethan. He took it carefully, understanding the trust being placed in his hands. As he began serving, Nia's voice rose clear and strong, leading the first verse of the hymn. Others joined in, the harmony swelling in the winter air. Ethan ladled chili steadily, smiling quietly as he watched the scene unfold. Mercy wasn't efficient. It didn't fit neatly into spreadsheets or quarterly reports. But it was good. And now, with the Trust's foundation solid and the community's wisdom guiding its course, it was built to last. By Saturday evening, the heaters hummed, the hotline rang only for small fixes, and Nia's breath sounded like any child's, easy,